What is going on, guys? Happy Tuesday and welcome back to yet another North to South show here presented by Touchdowns to Home Runs. Happy Tuesday. I'm still in isolation. If you see behind me, nothing behind me, still holding the microphone. And I think the lighting's a bit better, honestly, today because I'm filming this during the day. We got some natural light coming in, so it makes it look better. Where the other two videos I've done in here have been at night, so I'm just using like the lamps that I have here because I didn't bring my studio lights with me. But lots to talk about today because obviously it's Tuesday. I'm going to do my SEC weekly picks for you guys. Very interesting week in the SEC. We got some big games. Obviously, the college game day game is going to be Auburn traveling to Penn State, which if we're talking about SEC versus Big Ten football, that is going to be one of the most premier matchups. I think it might be the only Big Ten SEC matchup, at least in the regular season. So very intrigued to see what we have going on there as Auburn travels to Penn State for obviously a whiteout game. Other than that, I want to talk about Texas A&M and the news that Haynes King is going to be out for at least 5 weeks. 5 weeks, which is obviously not a good sign for Texas A&M. What does Texas A&M have to do? What are their next steps and everything like that? Looking like Zach Calzada is going to be the next quarterback for Texas A&M moving forward. Why did Texas A&M struggle in that Colorado game, and what are they going to have to do to get better from that game? So that's going to be interesting. And then finishing up with talking about the Florida quarterback situation going into the Alabama game. Many people would call this the biggest game of the season. Many people would also say this is their second biggest game of the season and still say the Georgia game is bigger. But anytime you have Alabama coming in to your home stadium, it is going to be an interesting, very interesting game and a game that your team needs to prepare for a ton for. And what is the game plan for Florida coming into this game? Who do they really stick with that quarterback if they want to go up against this amazing Alabama defense and be able to put up some points? Because we know Alabama's going to score, but can Florida match them scoring-wise? We saw Florida was pretty much able to do it in the SEC championship last year, but with a new offense, how will Florida respond to this new Alabama team that they are about to face this Saturday? So guys, we got an absolutely packed show today, guys. SEC picks, Texas A&M, Florida. Sit back, relax, guys, and enjoy the show. So after Ohio State got shocked off by Oregon in Columbus, at least in my opinion, it looked like Texas A&M had a pretty easy walk to get in a top 4 spot going into this week. Now, Texas A&M was in Colorado. Obviously, there's a bit of an altitude change there. If you watched any of the previews, not just my videos, but anyone's previews, they're going to talk about the altitude and that stuff. And did it really make a difference? I don't know. I can't make the judgment there. But obviously, that this Texas A&M game that they did play against Colorado kind of hurt them in the AP as they dropped 2 spots from what they were at when they had. In my opinion, obviously Oregon is now that 4th team, but in my opinion, if Texas A&M took care of business against Colorado in a more convincing fashion, Texas A&M would have been put at that number 4 spot. So obviously that doesn't happen. Haynes King gets injured early in that game. Zach Calzada has to come in, and it took a long time for Texas A&M to finally sniff out the end zone until it was a late 4th quarter. Obviously, you had Isaiah Spiller going to the end zone, makes a nice catch in the end zone, and Texas A&M is able to beat the Colorado Buffaloes by 3 points in Denver. What is next for Texas A&M? And that's what we're going to talk about here, because now that Haynes King is ultimately injured, it has looked like he is going to be out for 5 weeks with a lower leg injury. Where on earth does Texas A&M go from this point? Because this week they get kind of an easier game. They play New Mexico, okay? No matter who you put in at quarterback there, Zach Calzada should be able to go out and have a good game there. And they're not going up against anything special. But it's the week after you go up against Arkansas, who, if you watched Arkansas against Texas, Arkansas is not going to be an easy out by any stretch at all this season. Arkansas is looking really, really good. And if you go into that game in Dallas, or it's in Arlington, I'm pretty sure it's in AT&T Stadium. If you go into that game in week 4 and you do not have an offense that you feel confident enough can score, where Arkansas does, Arkansas can rush the football now, you're going to be in trouble if you're Texas A&M. So what does Texas A&M really have to focus on to get back to confidence in being able to score? Because Texas A&M's defense, if we just want to go off on a tangent here for a second, if you watch this Texas A&M defense, I look at some of the best defenses in the country. I look at Alabama, I look at Georgia, and Texas A&M is right up there. Like, I'm dead serious. That's how good I feel like Texas A&M's defense is this season. They got an amazing D-line. Their secondary has really, really, really surprised me this season. Great linebackers. Texas A&M's defense swarms to the ball. They get to the ball, and they hit hard, and they finish tackles. And I think that was a huge reason why Texas A&M was able to beat Colorado this weekend, because Colorado had an decent offense. Like, if Texas A&M's defense wasn't that good, there's no doubt in my mind that Colorado would have came out with a win in that game, because one more score in that game for Colorado and it's ball game over. One more touchdown in that game and it's ball game over. Colorado shocks off number 5 Texas A&M, and we got a whole different ball game that we're going out with going into week 3. But Texas A&M's defense, it really reminded me of just watching a Chicago Bears game, or the old Chicago Bears, because I'm a big Bears fan. Our defense sucks now, but back in like 2019, where our defense would just constantly be going out and getting stops and our offense just couldn't do anything, and then we finally squeak out with a win somehow. So watching that Texas A&M Colorado game really took me back to like the 2019 Chicago Bears, but now our defense and our offense isn't good. So enough about that, enough about the Bears. Let's get back to Texas A&M. So this Texas A&M offense, if you look at what they were able to do in that game against Colorado, now obviously Calzada threw 18 for 38, not the greatest percentage there. You obviously want to get that up. He had a ton of missed throws, a ton of short throws, and a ton where it just seemed like they could not find any other guys open. And just, I don't know if it was drop balls or just good coverage on Colorado's part, but no matter what, especially on third downs, Calzada just was not able to get that ball in, and it was a huge struggle the whole game until finally that final drive, or the drive when Calzada makes it into the end zone and then fumbles through the end zone. That was chaotic, but they were able to finally score in one of the last drives of the game. Obviously a passing touchdown, so Calzada ended the game. What did he end the game with? 18 for 38, 183 yards for 1 touchdown, a 49.9 QBR. Calzada, obviously this was his first game. He didn't really know that he was going to be playing in this game. Now, as a backup quarterback, you always have to be prepared to get into the football game, but it's different just getting thrown in after your starting quarterback gets injured. So I don't want to go too hard on Calzada here, because obviously this was his first game. He gets thrown in a situation where, let's say, he wasn't necessarily ready for it yet, and it obviously showed with the stats and everything like that. So there definitely can be some growing to be done from this game for Zach Calzada. But you look at the rest of Texas A&M's offense, and before the season, I raved about this rushing game. Because you have Isaiah Spiller, who's one of the best running backs in all of college football, in my opinion. You have Devon Achane, who's one of the fastest guys and has one of the best breakout abilities of any running back in the SEC. And then even if you want to throw in Anaya Smith, I know we talk about him as a wide receiver now, but he does some work out of the backfield. They have a 3-headed monster in the backfield for Texas A&M. So if you want to move the ball up and down the field, the rushing game, especially with a newer quarterback, a younger quarterback who still has to get more experience and get more confident in his game, the rushing game has to be there. And that's what was not there for Texas A&M this Saturday. If you look at their total rushing stats, 97 yards, Achane only rushed for 50, and then you had Isaiah Spiller. Yes, that is right. Isaiah Spiller only rushing for 20 yards in this game. He had 8 rushes for only 20 yards. And you just look at that and you're like, if this offense wants to get anything going, if they want to put up points this season, like, let's not forget, in all likelihood, Haynes King is going to be out for that Alabama game. And you know, this is Texas A&M's, many people have talked about this is Texas A&M's year to go out and finally beat Alabama. You're not going to be able to beat Alabama if you're not able to score the football. You have to be able to establish some kind of identity on offense if Texas A&M wants to go into that game. Even the Arkansas game, even the Mississippi State game that Texas A&M has coming up, they have to be able to establish some kind of offense. And I see with the young, inexperienced quarterback in Zach Calzada, who still needs to grow, the rushing game has to be that identity for Texas A&M. Now, the offensive line, we knew was going to be a bit of a struggle for Texas A&M. They really got to get going and pushing the offensive line back. The defensive line of the other team back. This offensive line really has to get some push to it, create some holes for the running backs, and really push that defensive line to be able to establish this running game, because we know the talent that you have in the backfield. No questions asked. We know that the talent that you have at all the receiving positions. No questions about that. The offensive line and the quarterback was my main concern for Texas A&M coming into this season, and it's really showing now. Even though your starter did get injured, Haynes King was still a question mark for me. Now, he's come in and he's had a decent start to his Texas A&M career. Obviously, he had some troubles in the Kent State game, throwing some picks there, and now he's obviously hurt. Calzada is now the guy, and he had some accuracy issues in that first game. It's all coming back to QB and offensive line, and in my opinion, as long as you have Calzada being able to be a game manager, he doesn't need to be some breakout guy. He needs to make some throws, obviously. He needs to get more accurate with his passing. But I think the rest of this Texas A&M season really relies on how well this offensive line is able to push the D-lines back, because the running game is how Texas A&M is going to be able to get down the field. For the rest of the season, that is going to be Texas A&M's strength, or it has to be Texas A&M's strength if they want to put up more than 10 points against a Colorado defense. So for the next couple games, you're going to have New Mexico. This is a chance to really get some confidence in your guys, go out and put up a high-scoring game for Texas A&M. But when it comes to that Arkansas game, this offensive line and Calzada have to be ready to do something more than what happened in this game, because receiving what happened in this game, they were caught for 191 yards. You had Weidermeyer catching for like 66. You had Spiller catching for 56. Achane catching for 24. And then your wide receivers like Lane, he seemed like the guy to go to on third down. Had a rough time getting him the ball. So try to get him the ball more, be more accurate towards him. And let's see Texas A&M how they do in the next couple games without Haynes King, going forward with Calzada, and how this offensive line is able to really establish this running game going forward. Now I want to talk about one of the most interesting teams in all of college football right now, and people aren't talking about them enough, and it's just because they haven't played a comparable opponent in the first 2 weeks that they've played. They have played Florida Atlantic and USF, and obviously that is going to change this week when this team gets Alabama in their home stadium. Obviously, I'm talking about the Florida Gators, and what else could I be talking about the Florida Gators about if not the quarterback situation that they got going on down there in Gainesville right now? Obviously, this week's a big week. People call this the biggest cross-divisional game of the SEC of the whole season. I think it easily is. Some people say this is the biggest SEC game of the whole year. Now, that statement, I'm a bit iffy on, but this is no doubt a big game in the SEC and one of the biggest games of the week when you have number 1 and number 13 going at it in Gainesville. What does Florida do at the quarterback? Because it looked like Emory Jones was the guy all preseason. After Kyle Trask leaves, it looks like this was easily Emory Jones' job, and that there's no question about that. Emory Jones was going to be the guy, and he was not only going to be the guy, but he was going to be one of the better quarterbacks in all the SEC. Now, in the first 2 games, Florida has kind of been running this dual quarterback system with Emory Jones and now Anthony Richardson, and over the past 2 games, it's left you questioning who is the guy at Florida. Is there a one specific guy? Are we just trying out multiple guys? Or is this going to be the system that we're going to be constantly running, where we're running this dual quarterback system, get 2 guys in, really screw up the defense, and when you got to go up against Alabama this weekend, you got to do whatever you can to get this defense on their heels and everything like that. You got to be able to make this defense be thinking at all times and make them make mistakes, because if Florida's able to do that, Florida has a chance in this ball game. We all know Alabama's offense is going to put up a lot of points in this game, so Florida has to match them offensively in some sense. They got to score the football, and what better way to do that than have this dual quarterback system to really screw up the best defense, in my opinion, the best defense in all the country. Now, you could argue that that's Georgia. You could argue that that's Texas A&M. You could argue that that is Clemson. I think Alabama has the best defense in all of the country. That's how good they are. That is literally how good they are. But let's get back to talking about this Florida quarterback situation. Anthony Richardson versus Emory Jones. What do you go into this game looking for? Who is the guy going into this game? Or is it both guys? And in my honest opinion, after seeing both guys the past 2 games, seeing Emory Jones, seeing Anthony Richardson, what do I want to see from Florida going into this game? Anthony Richardson obviously is the bigger rushing guy. This is the guy that is going to pick up multiple yards on the ground with his feet, and there's no problem with that. Whatever gets you down the field. I mean, you look at college football, you look at some of the greatest college football quarterbacks in the last couple years, they're all guys who can run down the field. Now, most of them still have to be able to have an arm and everything like that. And Anthony Richardson is still thrown for some touchdown. Like, let's be honest, he threw for 2 in that USF game, but they only let him throw the ball 3 times. And that says something about how you feel about his throwing abilities when you have him going in at quarterback and you only have him throwing the ball 3 times. The reason he had so many touchdowns, or he had 2 touchdowns, because they had guys wide open down the middle of the field because the defense was expecting him to run. Now, he has put up over 100 rushing yards in each of his performances in both games, and that's not even playing the whole game. That's just playing with the limited playing time that Florida is putting him in for. The guy can rush the football. Are you going to be as effective rushing the football as you were against USF and against FAU? Has Alabama really seen a rushing quarterback yet this season? Well, they saw De'Aaron King in the first game of the season, and obviously he is a guy who can play with his feet and improvise, do all these things with his feet. But is he at Anthony Richardson's level? I don't think so. I think Anthony Richardson is a whole different breed of a rushing quarterback. Right now, for all the guys that you see in college football, Anthony Richardson is obviously at the top of for those who can rush. Emory Jones, on the other hand, him throwing the football, obviously you like his arm better a lot more than Anthony Richardson. I don't think that there's any question that you'd rather have Emory Jones throwing the football, but is this a Florida attack that wants to throw the football in this game, or is this a Florida team who is going to try to use a ton of clock, rush the football constantly? Like, let's be honest, not only does Florida have good rushing quarterbacks, but they got good rushing running backs. Obviously, you have to. But you look at guys like Dameon Pierce, you look at guys like DeMarcus Bowman. Florida has been able to rush the football really, really well in their first couple of games, and I do not picture that stopping in these games. So you might look at this and you might be like, yes, we still need to get some yards in the air. We still got to throw the football, but is this a team that wants to keep the ball on the ground, really chew up some clock so Alabama can't run up the scoreboard? When you have the ball in your hands for a majority of the game, it looks really good for you because that's when you feel like you are in control of the game. When you are in control of the clock, which usually rushing the football allows you to do that, it's a whole different ball game. So that's what I feel Florida is going to go for in this game. They're still going to put Emory Jones in. They're going to still have him throw the ball around a bit, but do not be surprised if you see a really steady dose of Anthony Richardson in this game, running a lot of read options. Trust me, read option is going to be a huge utilized play in this game. They are going to keep that Alabama linebackers, even though Alabama has some of the best linebackers in the game, they're going to make them make some tough decisions in this game with that read option because it's going to be tough. You're going to have to keep a QB spy on Anthony Richardson at all times, and you're going to have to worry about that running back at the same time. So it is going to be a tough game for Alabama linebackers. If they do decide to keep Anthony Richardson in the game for a majority of the time, which I think they will, but Emory Jones will still see some playing time in getting him to be able to throw the ball around. In 3rd and long situations, I do not think you're going to see Anthony Richardson on the field. I still think you're going to be Emory Jones. Now, Emory Jones can still rush the football, just not as well. He's not as big of a threat as Anthony Richardson in this game. So that's what I kind of want to see from Florida moving forward in this game. Can Florida be able to knock off Alabama? If you have the offensive attack, obviously going forward with Anthony Richardson, and you're able to Emory Jones needs to be able to throw the football a bit better. Obviously, throwing 2 picks against USF isn't a good sign, but obviously, new day, new game coming forth this Saturday. So it's going to be a very interesting game for Florida moving forward. Let me know in the comments if you're a Florida fan, because I know we got a ton on this channel. Appreciate you guys as always, because Florida fans are some of the best fans that I have on this channel, constantly supporting, constantly commenting, all that kind of stuff. So if you're a Florida fan, please let me know in the comments what you want to see from the Florida quarterback position in this game. Do you want to see more of Anthony Richardson? Do you want to see more of Emory Jones? Or do you want to see 50-50? Or do you want to see just one guy the whole game? I'd love to hear from you guys because obviously this is your guys' team and your opinion matters. So let me know in the comments down below. But right now I'm kind of leaning towards really work with this Anthony Richardson backfield and have him really work with the running backs. And I think Florida will find some success this weekend against Alabama. It is now time for the best part of every single week. That is right. We have our SEC picks coming up. Now, before we get into the SEC picks from this week, or going into my picks for this week, we got to look back at last week. And last week, I went 8-4. Obviously, we had 13 games going on, but I don't pick the South Carolina Gamecocks anymore. And then we had our first all-SEC game as Kentucky and Missouri played. So, therefore, I picked 12 games, went 8-4. I won all the games except Texas, Arkansas. I did pick Texas in that game, and obviously that was a big miss. I picked NC State over Mississippi State, lost that one. I picked Missouri over Kentucky, and then I picked Colorado State over Vanderbilt. So now my record is I went 11-2 the first week, went 8-4, so I'm 19-6 going into week 3. Not a bad record, but I definitely want to be better. You look at getting 19 wins. A lot of FCS teams have played SEC teams so far, so those aren't necessarily hard games to pick. But 19-6, I'm not really complaining, but I definitely want to get it better this week. And I have that opportunity this week in week 3 as we have some amazing games going down the slate. So far, we won't go through the slate first. I'll just give you guys the pick, go in order, and tell you guys the games, and we'll go on from there. But we all know we have some great games coming on in this week. Going to get to them later. But starting off, my SEC picks for week 3. Week 3 at 12 o'clock on SEC Network Alternate and ESPN Plus. We have Chattanooga and Kentucky. Not a hard pick at all. I'm taking Kentucky here, but you really look at this Kentucky offense and what they were able to do against Missouri. First of all, rushing the football, this offensive line is really able to push the other team's defensive line around, and Chris Rodriguez is looking like one of the best running backs in all the SEC, which a ton of people knew coming into this season. I personally had my doubts about Kentucky's rushing game. That has obviously changed now, and even in the passing game, Levis has done a lot better than I expected him to do. I got to give him credit for that. And Wan'Dale Robinson, a bunch of guys, Josh Ali, this receiving core is a lot better than I expected. Wan'Dale Robinson is proving to be one of the best transfers in all of college football going into this season, obviously coming into Nebraska, but coming from Nebraska. Kentucky's looking really, really good this season. They're a team that I think got snubbed from the AP Top 25 this week, so hopefully they'll be able to change that with a big win against Chattanooga, and hopefully a team on the cusp of the Top 25 drops out so Kentucky can come in. So I'm taking Kentucky easily in this game. Coming up at 12 o'clock on same thing, SEC Network Alternate and ESPN Plus, we have Southeast Missouri State taking on the Missouri Tigers. Now, Missouri obviously loses last week to Kentucky. Their offense was able to get going a lot better in the second half of that game against Kentucky. They obviously made it close. Just some errors at the end of the game was able to cost them. This is an easy pick. I'm taking Missouri over Southeast Missouri State. They obviously got to bounce back after that Kentucky loss, but I still think Missouri is a good team. Definitely a good enough team to blow Southeast Missouri State out of the water, so I'm taking the Missouri Tigers here. Same thing, 12 o'clock, SEC Network, Alternate, and ESPN Plus. We have Tennessee Tech versus Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is coming off of that loss to Pitt, which was actually a really close game if you watched it. Tennessee had the lead early, but then they lost it, and ultimately ended up losing the game. They play Tennessee Tech. Again, same thing, FCS team. This should be a win for Tennessee. I'm taking the Tennessee Volunteers here. Looking for a bounce back, kind of the same thing as that Missouri game. Looking for a bounce back after a tough loss in week 2. So let's see how Tennessee is able to bounce back, but this is no questions for me, taking the Tennessee Volunteers. Next up at 12 o'clock on SEC Network, we have New Mexico traveling to College Station to take on the number 7th ranked Texas A&M Aggies, who obviously dropped 2 spots after their very, very, very close win against the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, I talked about Texas A&M earlier in the show, talking about what is next for Zach Calzadis ever since Haynes King is out. What is next for this offense? They really got to get a rushing game going in this game. You're going up against New Mexico. This should be a win. This has to be a win, and this should not only be a win, but a big win. You really got to establish something on offense going into that Week 4 game in Arlington against Arkansas. This is going to be a big game for Texas A&M, getting the passing game going, getting Zach Calzada comfortable with being the guy at Texas A&M now, and really having some support for him. They got to get that rushing game going, and this is the game to do so before you get into that Arkansas game, because you can't just flip a switch. You got to work through it progressively. This is the game that you have before your schedule really kicks in. So Texas A&M, this is a game that they're going to win. I'm picking Texas A&M here, but they got to win convincingly and have a really, really, really good offensive showing in this game. No questions about it. First CBS game of the season. The smile on my face when that music, the theme music for CBS, SEC on CBS, finally comes on is going to be immense. I cannot wait for SEC on CBS to finally come back. We have the biggest cross-divisional game of the SEC regular season coming up here, week 3, 3:30 on CBS as the Alabama Crimson Tide travel to Gainesville, Florida to take on the Florida Gators. Now, this is obviously a game that, unlike the last ones, I'm obviously going to go into a bit more detail in, because it's not like Alabama's going out and playing an FCS team. It's not like Florida's going on and playing USF again. This is actually a big-time game. Now, Alabama's obviously coming in with the number 1 next to their name, and it is deserving. I think Alabama is the best team in the country. The only team that gives them a bit of a run for their money right now is the Georgia Bulldogs. After that, after Alabama, Georgia, not even close. There is a massive gap in college football to see who is the best team in college football. Alabama is out there. Alabama is the top dog right now in all of college football. This offense is lethal. Everything that Bryce Young's been able to do, everything that these receivers have been able to do, everything that this rushing game has been able to do has been impressive for Alabama so far. And really going forward, what impresses me most about this Alabama team is this defense. This Alabama defense can swarm to the football, and they can hit, and they can get the guy on the ground. Missed tackles is not something that Alabama is known for this season, and they're not going to be, because Alabama finishes tackles. This linebacking core is the best in all of the country, no question about it. This Alabama secondary is very, very good. Alabama is going to try to limit Florida as much as possible in this game. Now, Florida, on the other hand, feels like they have some weapons on offense to be able to compete with this Alabama defense and be able to put up some points on the board. Obviously, they've been running this dual quarterback situation, which I just talked about in the segment prior, with Anthony Richardson and with Emory Jones. What does Florida look to do in this game? Who does Florida really rely on at the quarterback situation? Is this going to be a run-heavy Florida offense coming into this Alabama game? Are they going to try to control the clock, which I think they will? I think that they're going to chew a lot of time off the clock, so they had the ball in their hands more, and they're really in control of this game. I think this is going to be a rush-heavy Florida offense going forward, and they're going to try to push the ball on the ground and try to get into that Alabama end zone multiple times, because we know if you're going up against Alabama, you got to score, and you got to be able to score a lot. Who do I think is going to win this game? Who am I taking? There's been nothing to deter me away from taking Alabama in any given game. From what I've seen from Alabama so far in this game, even though Alabama is going to be traveling into a tough environment going against Florida, and this will be really Bryce Young's first big test in a scary away of environment, I still think Alabama's going to win. I think this Alabama offense will put up more than enough to be able to win the game, and I think Alabama's defense, even though I feel like Florida's going to be able to have some rhythm early on in this game when they go out with their whole dual-headed quarterback situation that they got going on there, and it's going to be tough for Alabama in the beginning. I think once you get after that first quarter and Alabama really settles in defensively, they're going to get a turnover or something like that. Someone's going to make a big hit. They're going to force a fumble. They're going to get an interception. And I think at that point in the second quarter is when this game is really going to shift momentum-wise. So I think Florida is able to keep it close in the beginning. I think Florida is going to go out and put up a score or two early in this game. But ultimately, as I look towards the end of the game, it's really, really tough for me to say that Florida can hang with Alabama for 4 quarters. For 2 quarters, maybe I'm taking Florida, but for 4 quarters in this game, which is obviously a full football game, which is what we're playing here, I'm taking the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's going to be a really, really, really good game. It's going to be a great game, but Alabama's just too much for Florida to handle right now. As I see right now, from what I've seen from Alabama right now, give me the Alabama Crimson Tide in the CBS 3:30 slot. 4 o'clock on SEC Network, we have the Georgia Southern Eagles taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. The number 20 Arkansas Razorbacks. Yes, I am absolutely thrilled that Arkansas is now ranked, because Arkansas is a team that I've been backing all preseason. Even though I did take Texas over them, I still think that Arkansas is a good football team, and I still said that this was going to be a bowl-eligible team in 2021. And Arkansas started out the season 2-0 and have a 2-0 next to their name in the AP. So Arkansas is going to win this game. I'm taking Arkansas in this game. Let's see what this rushing game is able to do after the amazing performance that they were able to put up against Texas. Let's see if they are just as dominant, because obviously they have a big game in week 4 as well when they go on and take Texas A&M on in Arlington. I've talked about that for Texas A&M, but Arkansas just has to, they found their identity on offense. They got to stick with it, ground and pound on the game, rush the ball up the gut, hit them hard in the mouth. And let's see how Arkansas is able to do after that amazing win against Texas. Let's hope that they don't get too cocky, because we've seen teams do that after a big win. Let's hope Arkansas comes in with the same attitude and the same energy that they had in that Texas game and goes and blows Georgia Southern out of the water. So I'm taking the Arkansas Razorbacks in that one. 4 o'clock, ESPN2, very interesting game. A game that when we talk about SEC Week 3 that you're not going to think about off the top of your head, because obviously you're going to think about that Alabama-Florida one that I just talked about, and then you're going to think the other one that I'm about to talk about in the next game. I'm about to talk about this one, but this one, Mississippi State at Memphis, is going to be a very interesting one because Memphis is one of the better group of 5 teams as I see right now. Memphis is one of the better group of 5 teams. You have a Mississippi State team coming in 2-0, taking care of business against NC State last week, but that game was at home. Does the away advantage, or does the home field advantage for Memphis in this game do anything to Mississippi State? Mississippi State goes out, they have an amazing offensive performance last week, and defensive-wise, I think NC State only scored 10 points on them, so it was an overall very impressive performance. Memphis went out against Arkansas State. Their defense struggled against Arkansas State, but they were able to put up multiple points in that game. I think they ended up scoring 50-plus in that game against Arkansas State, so in this game, I'm leaning towards Mississippi State. I just feel like defensively they'll be able to shut down Memphis a bit more, and obviously Mississippi State can score the football still, and this Memphis defense is struggling, so I am going to take Mississippi State in this game, but Memphis could make this a really, really close game. If you're looking for any Group of 5 SEC upset in this week, definitely look at Mississippi State and Memphis 110%. 7 o'clock ESPN, South Carolina, Georgia. We don't pick the South Carolina games anymore. I explained that earlier, but Georgia's going out, continuing business, obviously. I don't know what's going on with JT Daniels. Stetson Bennett could be the guy there. It could be Carson Beck. It could be JT Daniels. Lots more to figure out about this Georgia offense going into this game. So that's all I'm going to say about this game. Not going to pick a winner, but Georgia, interesting to see what they're going to be able to do in Week 3. They got their first night game at Sanford Stadium. Should be an amazing environment. 7:30 on ABC. We have the Auburn Tigers for the first time ever traveling to Happy Valley to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions in Beaver Stadium for the big whiteout game of the season. 2 ranked teams. Auburn's 22. I thought they were 23, but they're 22. Obviously, they were 25 last week. And now you have Penn State, who came off of a big win in Week 1, go out and get a win this week as well. 2 ranked teams coming into Happy Valley for the place that is known as the best environment in all of college football. Auburn has really impressed me. Now, Auburn has played 2 inferior opponents. Obviously, their opponents are not great so far, and they've blown both of those opponents out of the water, as they should. Everything that Auburn has had to do against their first 2 opponents, and they played Akron and they played Alabama State, Auburn has done. Bo Nix has looked great so far. This Auburn defense has looked amazing so far. But Penn State is obviously a different story. Penn State has played a really good opponent. Penn State has played Wisconsin. They had a huge road test Week 1 traveling to Camp Randall, and they were able to come out of that game with a win. I'm going to take Penn State in this game, and I know I'm making this pick kind of early in my description, but here's why I'm going to take Penn State. Auburn, historically, on the road, is really, really, especially Bo Nix in Auburn, traveling on the road, is something that has never really looked good, at least for me, in my opinion. Auburn's offense traveling on the road is something that has really scared me over the years, and me being able, this is a 50-50 game for me. I would not be surprised if either of these teams come out with the win in this game, but what I have noticed in my couple years of picking these games and these SEC picks and everything like that, if you ever feel like it's a 50-50 game, always go with the home team, because the environment traveling on the road, especially if we're talking about the whiteout, like we're talking about the Penn State whiteout, for goodness sake. This isn't just traveling to Tulane or something like that, going to their Group of 5 stadium or whatever. Not saying that Tulane has bad fans or anything like that, but you're going up in that game, you'll see like 20,000, 30,000 fans max. You're going up against 110,000 fans here, all wearing white. If you go back to that Michigan game, the last whiteout that they had and the timeout and everything that had to happen because Michigan couldn't hear their first play call. They couldn't get the snap off. That's the same environment. This is the first whiteout in 2 years. That is the exact same environment that you're going to be going up against in this Auburn-Penn State game. And seeing Bo Nix on the road before, it does not look very good. You're going to be going up against the harshest environment that you have ever faced in your whole career when you travel to Penn State. So I think Penn State will do enough offensively, even though Penn State's offense hasn't proved to be the greatest so far. I think Penn State's offense will be productive enough offensively to score more than Auburn. I'm looking for Penn State's defense to have an amazing game here, so give me Penn State in this game, but Auburn could make this a really close game. Again, I said it before, I would not be surprised if either of these teams win the game, but when doubtful, always take the home team, especially when it's the whiteout. No questions asked. 7:30 on SEC Network, we have Central Michigan against LSU. LSU's trying to push it to 2-1. Central Michigan is also trying to push it to 2-1. I'm taking LSU in this game. It's in Death Valley. They're playing a group of 5 team. No questions asked. LSU really just has to get on track. Going into their SEC slate, which is going to begin soon, I'm pretty sure, LSU just has to get something on the board. They got to pick up wins, and they got to pick up convincing wins. So I'm taking LSU in this game. Hopefully they win convincingly. 8 o'clock, ESPN2 Tulane versus Ole Miss. Again, Ole Miss is a ranked team, 17th in the country. I think Ole Miss wins this game. Tulane has been decent. Tulane, remember that team that only lost to Oklahoma by 5 and honestly could have had a chance, a really good chance after recovering that onside kick to beat Oklahoma in week 1. So this might not be as easy of a win as you think for Ole Miss, but I still think Ole Miss is going to end up winning this game. Give me the Ole Miss Rebels in this one. Their offense is just way too much to handle. And then 8 o'clock on ESPNU, we have Stanford traveling to Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee. Vanderbilt picked up their first win of the season. They go out to, where does Colorado State play? Do they play in, I don't even know where Colorado State plays, but they go to Colorado State. They come out with a win there. Is Vanderbilt able to keep the bus rolling going up against a Stanford team who Stanford honestly isn't a terrible team? I think did they go out and beat USC last week? Was that their win? Were they the team that beat USC? Yes, they were the team that beat USC last week. So obviously they're coming off of a big win. I'm taking Stanford in this game. I just haven't seen enough from Vanderbilt to be able to pick them confidently in any game yet. Even though they are coming off of a win, it was a 3-point win against Colorado State. Stanford's a different team than Colorado State. So I'm taking Stanford. Those are my picks for week 3, guys. We got tons of great games. Enjoy the weekend. It is going to be an amazing weekend of college football. Going in September 18th. Next week is week 4. We're really going to see the SEC start to kick in a gear. Week 4, we got a ton of SEC games coming up next week. So, guys, enjoy your weekend. Thank you for tuning in. Comment, like, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and definitely come back next time.